This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to the next in a series I'm calling What Happened To. This is the sixth video, or I should say seventh video in the series. We're just over the halfway point. Last week I kind of had like a midway recap. So I have links to the playlists and everything below. But the long and short of it is, if this is the first time you're seeing it, I go back through the most anticipated list. In this case, it's for the year 2015. I look at the 20 or so games that's on there, and then I kind of see, did they last? Are they still around? Did they even have a splash at all? I will skip any that are like repeats, because sometimes the games don't come out the year everybody expects them to. And so if I've already talked about it, I'm not going to talk about them again. But again, there'll be links to everything below. So we're just going to jump right in here. We're going to talk about number 20, Aquasphere. This was a Tasty Minstrel Games publication, a Stefan Feld game. I think this is only the second Stefan Feld game that we've seen on the list. But it's, again, indicative of his popularity growing. This game is still talked about. This is one I haven't played for a few years, but I did enjoy it, and I still would play it again, and I really enjoyed it. It's a very kind of weird, different game. You're like going under the water, undersea, and you're dealing with like infestations of some kind, if I recall correctly. So you have to kind of manage that in your sort of underwater sort of space station kind of thing. And then you're trying to do all these different tasks. It's very much a point salad. Kind of a really weird, quirky theme, especially for a normal kind of Stefan Feld game. But I'm not sure who's going to actually publish it. I think Tasty Minstrel actually co-published it with Pegasus Spiel or something like that. So you should still be able to pick it up and find it. Somebody's probably picked up the U.S. distribution for it recently. I don't know who though, but you can definitely find this one. So that's number 20, Aquasphere. Pretty fun game. Let's see. Number 19 is Pandemic State of Emergency. This is another pandemic expansion. You see these quite a bit on here. I mean, the longevity of Pandemic, this can't be denied. Just the other day, they announced Star Wars Clone Wars, the Pandemic system game. And I think it was last year they had the World of Warcraft Pandemic game. And they've had Pandemic, I think it was called Foundations of Rome or something like, not Foundations of Rome, Rise of Rome or something like that. You know, set kind of during the Roman Empire, but using kind of a weird sort of twist and riff on the Pandemic system. So again, this is just, you know, staying popular. It's still popular today. Not really much else to say about that. So number 18 is a game, another Tasty Minstrel game from designer, David Alms, I think his name is. This is called Harbour. This is one that I really enjoyed. This is a good lunchtime game. It's kind of a small sort of card drafting, card display, engine builder game. With some economic tracks and things like this. So you have like several resources that you're kind of tracking, and there's kind of a supply and demand thing. It's a pretty light game, but it is pretty crunchy for kind of the size of it. It's kind of the small box thing. This is also the designer of the Tiny Epic series games. I think that we found one way to kind of break the game, though. I'm not super sure about that. My memory is hazy, but I do remember really enjoying this. We played it probably about a dozen times or so at work. At lunchtime, so that was a fun one. So if you can find this one, I'd pick it up. It's a small little game. If you can find it cheap, it's going to give you some plays. It's going to be enjoyable. It may not have quite the longevity of some other games, because I think that's kind of a one or two kind of powerful strategies that we kind of unlocked. But it's a fun game. Okay, that was number 18, Harbour. Oh, speaking of Tiny Epic, number 17 is Tiny Epic Defenders. And this is the second, I think, in the series of Tiny Epic games. There's Tiny Epic Kingdoms and Tiny Epic Defenders, Tiny Epic Galaxies, Tiny Epic Old West, or whatever it's called. All kinds of stuff. Tiny Epic Zombies, Tiny Epic Dungeon Crawl. This, I think, I haven't played all of them, but I think this is the worst one. This is a co-op one, or you can play it solo too. It's kind of like they tried to boil down Defenders of the Realm into a small, Tiny Epic box. And really, nobody I played this with enjoyed it. It was just super dry and like really straightforward and not really having any excitement at all. There's been a few games in this series that I really enjoyed. I think Tiny Epic Galaxies is probably my favorite one. We had a lot of fun, again, at work with the lunch group then. But this is one that I think they came out with the second edition of this one to try to fix some stuff. But this was definitely coasting on that popularity of Tiny Epic Kingdoms, which is one I did enjoy. That was a cool one. It had some kind of like Dune style combat or Rex style combat, where you had the little wheel you could set. It was kind of just a straightforward area control game with like lots of asymmetric powers and stuff. That's actually a really fun game. But yeah, this one was kind of a big drop off. But that Tiny Epic name is still around today. It's still coming out with new games. Let's see. That's a repeat. We're going to skip that. Number 15 is Magic the Gathering Arena of the Planeswalkers. And this was sort of flash in the pan, although kind of sort of not really. It's basically took Magic and Heroescape, which is getting a new edition here in a year or two, and kind of mashed them together, because you had sort of the similar mechanics of the movement in the hexes and all that stuff in the combat of Heroescape, and then combined with kind of like a deck of cards with the Magic idea, and you would activate your different heroes and do that kind of stuff. It's actually a really fun game. I really enjoyed this game. Well, my youngest son and I played this one quite a bit. Actually, my oldest son, he loved Heroescape. That was kind of our thing. My oldest son and I used to play that a lot. But he had, by this time, I think he was out of the house. Or on his way. But so my youngest and I really liked to play this one. This was a lot of fun. And we did play Heroescape a little bit too, but that was kind of just, windows missing. But yeah, this is a cool game. I think you can still pick this up. I see this around somewhere. It's definitely not in print anymore. I'll be curious to see what they do with the Heroescape that comes out, if they're going to have eventually maybe some crossover with the Magic the Gathering IP or not. It really fits that theme, because you've got the different planes and the different sort of archetypes of different fantasy tropes and all that stuff that goes on in Magic these days. And Heroescape kind of is in that same thing. You would have like Old West characters with aliens, with dinosaurs, with all these sort of anachronistic types of theme mashups. And so the Magic and that kind of goes hand in hand. And it's a fun little solid game, and you should be able to pick this up pretty cheap still. I don't think they had like one expansion, maybe two. Yeah, so you can take a look at that. Let's see. Next one is a repeat. And number 13 is Star Wars Armada. I don't think this one has shown up on the list. We've had a lot of X-Wing, Star Wars X-Wing show up on the list. And this is, again, X-Wing, but it's sort of like, it's like X-Wing, but it has some differences, and it's this large-scale combat with the capital ships and little squads of X-Wings and TIE fighters. Like, you would move little groups that were like multiple models that were representing, I don't know, like 20 or 30 of a squad moving around. And I never had a chance to play this one. I was just not really interested in like getting involved in a game that was going to require me to collect miniatures at that point. And I liked X-Wing, but I had moved on from X-Wing by the time this had come out. I think to a person, though, that I've talked to, they all seem to say that they thought this was a better sort of more crunchy, more involved, more rewarding game than X-Wing. You just had a little bit more dynamic situations that could come up with this, just the larger variety of the ship types and all that kind of stuff. And it was more like a traditional miniatures game, where X-Wing was kind of like that. I can't remember what system it was based on, that flight path system that they had with the cards. The original was like a World War I game that X-Wing was kind of grown out of, and similar types of movements and stuff. This was a little bit more traditional, sort of big battle miniature game type of thing. So I think that kind of pushed some buttons to some people. Now this one's still going on. Fantasy Flight has sort of pushed off all their miniature stuff to Atomic Mass Games, and so this is still being supported a little bit. I don't know how much it's supported, but this has still been around. It was quite the temptation, I will say, for a while, but I just stayed away from it. And personally for me, like, I enjoy Star Wars, all the stuff. I like the TV shows and the movies and everything. But for a gaming thing, it's not like my most favorite thing. I do like Star Wars Rebellion, still have that one on my shelf, as well as the that Return of the Jedi thing. That was sort of like Queen's Gambit. So I have a couple of things, but it's not like the biggest draw for me. So I think it is for a lot of people, but this one definitely still around. So number 12, well, this is a really old game. It's El Grande, so this was a reprint. And I think this thing has stayed in print. It had been out of print for quite a while at this point. So I think the demand was really, really high to get this back into print. And it's like the original sort of pure area control game. You know, you see a lot of other games like this nowadays, Blood Rage and, you know, Chaos in the Old World and, you know, whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff. This is just a strict area control game. I do enjoy it. I actually did have a chance to play it again probably less than a year ago. And it was okay. Like, I was like, okay, yeah. I remember why this was good and this is fun. But I mean, man, there's so many other games, specifically Ankh, which to me is the Eric Sling, like, crowning achievement. I know it's not controversial because who cares, but, you know, some people don't like it because of the merger and some other things. I find that to be way more fascinating than El Grande, and Blood Rage even by itself a little more fascinating because it's really like Blood Rage is a lot like El Grande. Now that I went back and played it, I was like, oh wow, these two really have a lot in common with the whole card play thing, and there's kind of drafting in El Grande and stuff like that. I would recommend El Grande at least to try and just check it out because it's kind of like the godfather of the area control games. And it's definitely still in print, and they've had some big boxes, expansions and stuff like that recently for it. So definitely one that's been around longer than 2015. I think it came out in 95 or something. So that was that one. Number 11 is, well, it's Tokaido Collector's Edition. And Tokaido it's a weird game. I think it's another did Eric Lang and Antoine Bauza work on this together? I don't think so. Maybe not. I think Antoine Bauza did it by himself. This is a interesting game where you play like pandas and you get these like, you know, panda sticks and stuff. And I think I only played it once, maybe twice, but not much. I did enjoy it. It's a fun game. You can see here it got a collector's edition. I still hear this one talked about. It's kind of one of those in that same sort of Ticket to Ride sort of vibe, where it's pretty straightforward and simple. Has some good strategy stuff, and you know, there's some good tension and dynamics over the course of the game. It's just a really good, solid game. It's got some neat components. I don't remember specifically with the collector's edition what the different. I'm thinking of a completely different game here. This is not the one I'm thinking of. That was a different game. Tokaido was the one I did play. This one I didn't like it. Tokaido is the one that has you're going like a vacation and you sort of explore. I'm going to leave that in there. I could have edited it out, but I'm not. That's the one where you kind of go and you like sightsee and stuff like that. That one I didn't care for. And the collector's edition, I do remember what's in this. It's just this really kind of glorified production of this. This game was really popular and I just never could understand why. I was just really bored playing it. What is the other game I'm thinking of with the pandas? Somebody put that in a comment because I think it's the same designer. What is the name of that game? I will think of it by the end of the video, I'm sure. I looked it up. Takenoko. That's the one I was thinking of. Okay. So forgive me. They both start with the letter T. That Takenoko I did like. Tokaido I didn't really care for that one. So let's catch back up here. We're going to get to number 10, and this is for the Mage Knight unnamed expansion. I think this is the last expansion. They don't have the name here, so I'm not quite sure what it was for. We talked about another one before on either the previous year or the year before that. Mage Knight's still around. You can maybe see the bottom of the Ultimate Edition up there. That's a recent production. Not really much more to say about Mage Knight. It's lasted pretty long in terms of the timeline. So it's been out about 10 years now. Yeah, and it's just one of these big brainy, you know, heavy solo co-op, or you can play competitive games that, you know, people need to go check out. It is a huge, massive brain burner. And it's been out, so I'll be curious how much, if they ever do a new edition of this or something like that, maybe, I don't know. Let's see, so number 9, this is the first time we're seeing this here, Star Wars Imperial Assault expansions, and so these are for some of the expansions that were coming out that year. That's a game that's finished, it's run its arc. It was a game I really enjoyed. I still have it. I think I have everything for it. The neat thing about Star Wars Imperial Assault, and I've talked about it before on the channel, was you had your sort of campaign, which was fine. We played through the campaign of the base game. all the way through, and it was fun. It does have some drawbacks though, because a lot of the scenarios end up being like races to sort of get to some objective and just try to beat the ever increasing damage that the Imperial player can do, kind of thing. And so there's a lot of them like that. There's not really that much diversity in terms of how the scenarios play out. They kind of all play out the same. Now, what I really did like about it is the skirmish idea, where you could pick, like a little squad, and then you would fight your opponent, and it was just a 1v1 thing, which has some cool objectives and things. You could go and like hack computers to get extra like ability cards that you could spend. So there was a good kind of juggling, balancing act between fighting your opponent and doing the objectives and getting those little hack things to give yourself more abilities and stuff. And there were just so many different scenarios there, and maps and layouts and all that stuff. And then they eventually came out with the app, which was like just a pure co-op or solo experience, which I did not like that. But this is a game that is basically Descent with Star Wars slapped on, so to speak, if you want to be glib about it. But it's a fun game, and you can still see people playing this and talking about it and picking this up. It's not in a print cycle or anything like that. I don't think it will ever come back. They may have a second edition of it coming back out one day. I mean, you got some of these new TV shows and stuff coming out. I could see like, that'd be cool to have like an Andor one. That's a new series coming out. They've had a lot of these new Star Wars shows that are like in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, so in between episode 3 and 4. So there's probably a really good, theme that you can kind of pick up there. And I don't know that they'd be, if the marketing people would be into that, because there's not really a lot of big name characters that you could use. With Imperial Assault, you could bring in Han Solo or Luke Skywalker or Princess Leia, C-3PO, all the big well-known names as kind of like henchmen or mercenaries. You could add them along your kind of characters that nobody's ever heard of that you play. So maybe that's, marketing wise, that wouldn't be a good deal. But I think the setting of the kind of the rebellion, against the Empire and the new Empire and the new forming rebellion, that would be kind of an interesting dynamic there, that interesting space to play in. I think that'd be fun. I don't think that'll happen, but I'm just like daydreaming there. So that's number 9, Imperial Assault. Oh, number 8 is Tiny Epic Galaxies. Again, I think this is my favorite Tiny Epic game. I kind of talked about it on the last entry with Tiny Epic Defenders. This is a cool one. We played this one a lot at work at lunch. Just lots of interesting dynamics with this one. I thought real innovative mechanics with this one in particular. So I mean, not much to really say. I did a video review of it, and there's a bunch of other video reviews. I think I usually see this referred to as the strongest of the series. There's been a few others recently that I haven't played. It's not really most of the games are like, they're like, yeah, this is pretty good, but I don't really care about playing it again. But it really worked back then for a lunchtime thing where you could play it in under an hour. We could break it out. We had like a little cafeteria type thing, in our work, so we could break it out on the tables there and knock it out, and they don't take up a lot of space. So these kind of games were perfect back then. Anyway, that's number 8, Tiny Epic Galaxies. Number 7 is XCOM the board game, which has completely disappeared and gone away. I thought the game was excellent. It was really, really fun. Now, this is one of, if not the first, app-driven board game where you had kind of a large-scale, kind of bird's-eye view of the planet Earth, and you had an app that was kind of driving, the AI deck that you would have to deal with, and it would sort of, throw out encounters and hotspots and stuff like that around the planet, and you would send your little troops out there. So I think the one thing that was sort of, I think, disappointing to some people was because it was an XCOM game, but it wasn't about tactical skirmish combat, which is what that game is. At least probably 75% about the computer game. Now, this was more about if you played the XCOM computer game, you go out and you do your skirmish combats and your objectives, then you come back to kind of home base, and you have to manage your squad and their upgrades, and you've got to manage some of the technology research, and you got to build your base out, and you get kind of information about the different hotspots or the aliens that are invading the planet. and then you got to kind of deal with it there. So this is more about kind of the back at home, back at the base thing than the tactical squad combat thing. There's a lot of games out there. I mean, Galaxy Defenders, I think I talked about a couple of weeks ago. Everybody could just call that XCOM the board game because that's what it was. It was, it was kind of a dungeon crawl sort of idea, but it was really tactical, skirmishy sort of cooperative combat. And I think people wanted that out of an XCOM game, and I can kind of see that. But I didn't really have any marriage to XCOM, and when we sat down and played it, it was a lot of fun. Our group had a ton of fun with this game, and it was challenging. It was interesting how the AI would throw different things at you, and it was just really like a cool, refreshing way to kind of play the board game. You had kind of the app sitting off to the side. It didn't really intrude itself too much, into the game, and it was just fresh and interesting and exciting. And you had all of these curmudgeons and stuff. It's an app and a game, and it's like, okay, just don't play the game. You don't have to cry about it on the internet, and so I think it got a lot of flack for that, I guess. But, honestly, just as an experience, it was fun. It was awesome. And it was exciting. It was great. And if people want to deny themselves that experience, then that's their problem. Anyway, that's number 7, XCOM the board game. It's a fun game. If you can pick it up, it's no longer printed. The license has probably gone away from Fantasy Flight. I thought it was a fun game. Neat stuff. Number 6 here. This is a game I have not played. Interesting. Number 6 is Steampunk Rally. And I think this is from Roxley Games. I think this was their first game, actually. I'm not sure. First or second game. This one I frankly don't know anything about. This is the first for me here on all these lists. Well, if you go back to the first one, I probably didn't know something about Guns of Gettysburg. But this one completely missed me. It's steampunk. I don't care. I just don't. Steampunk is not something I go, oh, neat. It's not something I'm like, I have anything against it. It's just like, oh, okay, steampunk, cool. So I probably just went right through my brain. I was like, oh, steampunk, whoosh, and then gone. Next, scrolling through the list of the next game. So I don't really see people talk about this one that much. They could be just my predilection to ignore steampunk stuff, whatever that is. But I don't really know anything about that one, so I apologize. At least everything else up to this point I've been able to speak about, so you got to give me one. So number 5 is a Mysterium, and this was a big hot thing coming out of Essen, I believe, this year, or probably the previous year, and then it was being brought over. Mysterium's great. I just reviewed a game. It's on my shelf somewhere. It's Rear Window, which is kind of like a gamer's Mysterium, if you want to call it that, based on the Alfred Hitchcock movie Rear Window. Mysterium's a lot of fun. We played it several times, and it's one of those where you play sort of abstract image cards like Dixit or a game like that, if you've played that. Or Obscurio is another one like that came out after. This one's still in print, still sees the light of day. It's had expansions. It's a fun game. One player plays the ghost, kind of playing these images to sort of guide the other players to find out, who the murderer was and that kind of stuff. I would recommend trying it. For my money, you've got a new game that just came out called Rear Window. I think it's a better game. It's a little bit more nuanced and kind of obtuse a little bit, I think, compared to Mysterium. Mysterium is really easy to pick up and play and teach. Rear Window has just a little bit of extra layer on there, so you couldn't probably play it as easily with folks who don't play a lot of games. I don't think that much more though. But yeah, this is one that's inspired some other games, like I said, Obscurio and some other stuff too. Let's see. So that was number 5. We got another repeat. Number 2 here is Pandemic Legacy Season 1. And I think I had some confusion on the last video because Seafall was on that video, and I was like, I think I would have seen Pandemic Legacy Season 1. But apparently Seafall was already being worked on after Risk Legacy. But Pandemic Legacy Season 1 actually ended up coming out first. So that's an interesting thing. Now, Pandemic Legacy Season 1 and Season 2 I've both played. There's a Season 0. We've talked about Pandemic already in this video and other videos about how it just, it's just the rabbit that keeps on hitting the drum. And Legacy Season 1, it was great. And I like Season 2 was slightly better. I think that's kind of the contrarian review there. I really like Season 1. I really like Season 2, though. They were both amazing. I would highly recommend, like the utmost, highest recommendation I can give you to play Season 1. Season 2 is so weird and different, though. I love it. I love what they did with it. But as far as the ease of getting into and just, I guarantee you'll have a good time, Season 1 would be it. Season 2, you know, I've talked to people that are like, I didn't like it at all. I'm like, what? How? But other people, they've said, I liked it, but I like Season 1 more. I have Season 0. I'm looking right at it. I've had that since 2020. And I just have not, I've played it, but I haven't had a chance to sit down. I don't know what it is. I haven't had a chance. I'm going to play it. I'm not getting rid of it until I play it. But yeah, so Season 0 I've heard is even better. So I haven't tried it though. Well, anyway, I played, like, there's an intro scenario you can play before you start the campaign. I played that two or three times, but then I put it away. But I can't recommend it enough. Like, Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is just fantastic. I'm surprised it wasn't number 1, because it was actually number 1 on Board Game Geek for a while until it got replaced by Mr. Gloomhaven. So we'll see if Mr. Gloomhaven ever gets replaced. I think it's due. All right, so number 1 is Conan from, I think Asmodee was the one that ended up publishing this. Yeah, this was a cool game. I think it had some issues with the rules back then, and they had to kind of redo those. I like this game quite a bit. It's pretty interesting. It never really pulled me in all the way to kind of play through all of the scenarios and stuff. There was a new kind of edition of this game, completely different game called Batman something Adventures, and that was kind of the same system. That had a really big problem with its rulebook. I think it's getting, I don't even know if it's out yet, the new rulebook for that. I don't have either in my collection anymore, but these were cool. There's a game I've been playing recently called Oathsworn, which I'll probably have a review for in a few weeks once we get a chance to play some more. That took some stuff out of this. That's some neat things with the whole action management stuff. The one really cool thing that Conan did, and the same with Batman, and then there was another game from Privateer Press. They had a dungeon crawl that was like a space dungeon crawl that did this. And this is, I think, the takeaway and what people will really like is when the good guys, the party, is playing and they're using their actions, they'll be spending this energy cubes or these energy resources. And what that does is that gives energy to the other player who plays kind of the dungeon master or the overlord, like it would in Imperial Assault or Descent. And then that is giving them more energy. So there's a cool give and take there. Like the more that the good guys do, the more resources the evil player has to come back at them with. And that was just a really cool thing that I've seen in a couple of these different games here. But yeah, and it was set in Conan, and it had a lot of the, familiar art and in miniature form and that kind of stuff, and some of the familiar stories from some of the books and things. It wasn't based on the movie, it was based on the books. And yeah, it was pretty good. It was just kind of serviceable, I thought, at the end of the day. That's all I'm going to say about that one. So yeah, there's number 1, Conan. And there you go. That's a new list. And so we're going to do another one of these every week for a little bit until we run through till 2019. And then we'll probably have some kind of recap at the end. So back in the saddle. Thanks.